Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi. And I'm very excited today because we have a very special guest on our show today. She is the co-founder of the Caregivers Journey, and her name is Nancy Treaster. And she is an amazing woman who helps people that have family members and loved ones with dementia. And she's here today to talk about some of the important factors about being a caregiver and different facts about dementia and how to cope with people in your family or a loved one that you know that has dementia, that's part of your life, and how to get through it, and different tips and strategies and tools that you could use in your daily life to make it easier for you as a caregiver. And I just want to mention, she had mentioned some numbers that I think are very important. We have to really consider that there are 55 million people in the world with dementia and 7.4 million in the US. And she also had mentioned that it's growing and they expect it to triple in the future. And so this is something that we really need to understand, and we really need to really do what we can to help others and to be able to help people we know who have dementia, and also to learn maybe preventive ways on how we could prevent dementia. Even if it's genetically in our families, there are things you can do to help prevent dementia, health-wise also. So I'm going to give the path and the hat and whatever you want to say, Nancy. And I'm so honored to have you on the show. I'm so honored what you're doing. It takes a lot to be a caregiver. I was a caregiver and I had caregivers, when I was going through epilepsy, and it's not easy being a caregiver. It takes a lot, So I'm really glad that you're doing what you're doing, and I honor you for that. And I'm so happy that you're teaching others and giving support to other people who are caregivers. So can you just tell us a little about yourself and about the organization and what you do?
Thank you, Stacey. Yes, and thanks for helping us get the word out, which is really, our goal is to help dementia family caregivers around the world get the resources they need every day, and people like you are helping us get the word out, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I have been a dementia caregiver 3 times, and in all different circumstances, one related to Parkinson's, one related to Alzheimer's, and one related to frontotemporal dementia. So lots of different kinds of dementia. Sadly, they all end up at the end the same. They look a lot the same when you get to the end. But one of the things I found was I was very frustrated with having to figure out how to handle day-to-day dementia caregiving challenges through trial and error. I felt like I was guessing all the time. The first time I was a first-time caregiver, I had no idea what to expect or how to handle things. I will say, by the time I got to caregiving the second time, I was leading the charge in the family, telling people how to handle things. Okay, well, here's what we're going to do in this situation, and here's what we can expect next. And so I partnered up with a friend of mine, Sue Ryan, who's also had several dementia caregiving journeys, and we created something called the Caregiver's Journey. It's a website, thecaregiversjourney.com, pretty easy. Also, our main resource right now is a podcast and a blog. And what we do in the podcast and the blog is we talk about day-to-day dementia caregiving challenges, but we don't just talk about them. We do it in a very structured way. So let's say there's a podcast on bathing and dressing.
Mm-hmm.
All the podcasts are 25 minutes or so, under 30 minutes, all but one. And we're talk about, here's the situation with bathing and dressing. Here's how it's going to start, that there's going to be an issue. Here's the tip 1, tip 2, tip 3, tip 4. Here's how to handle it as it progresses through your journey. So we try to keep them short because we know caregivers don't have a lot of time. They're rushed for time. We try to tell stories so they understand why this tip is a good idea. Maybe we learned it the hard way. We did something wrong. And so here's a way not to do what we did. Here's a much better idea. And often we find ourselves, laughing and, really at ourselves for the silly situations we're in, or sometimes with, how we got there. So we try to make it fun and entertaining at the same time. So 25 minutes to help you get through a topic. And we've covered so many of the basic topics for dementia caregiving, just to really help dementia caregivers get through the day.
Right. And that's so important. What would be some topics, like tips you actually that you would want to express to the listeners if they have someone that is in their family with dementia, either if they're a caregiver or they have someone that they see on a frequent basis and has dementia, what would be some things that would be really helpful when they interact with that person?
Probably the main one is how you communicate with someone with dementia. And of course, that depends on where they are in their journey. But think that at some point, the person living with dementia isn't really getting everything you're saying. And
Mhm.
so it's important that you think about your body language, you think about your facial expressions, and not just the words coming out of your mouth. If you
Mhm.
look concerned and upset, they're going to be concerned and upset. They're reading your body language as much as they are your words. So always try to keep a calm voice, try to sit at their level if you're talking to them, and really think about the kinds of topics that you're bringing up. Don't ask them to remember. So a lot
Right.
of people say, "Oh, remember when we did?" No, that you're just testing them. Then they'll get frustrated if they're not so far down in their dementia path that they understand you're asking them to remember something they don't remember. You're just
Right.
making them scared. You're making them upset. So instead, let's say you want to talk about, remember when we went caroling for
Mhm.
Christmas? Just say, I love to go caroling and sing Jingle Bells. And if they jump in with, "Oh, remember when we did that?" Then great. They can lead that part of the conversation. If they don't jump in, great. You didn't offend them or cause them to be upset. And don't test them. "Do you know my name? What's your birthday?" You'd be shocked how many people sit down with someone with dementia and feel like their job is to test them. Well,
Right.
once again, our goal right now is to keep them um, with as much dignity as possible. So
Yeah.
if you can think about how do we help protect their dignity, don't make them feel stupid. So
Yes.
those are some of my top tips.
I love that. I love that so much because I see a lot of people with dementia, they get very frustrated. And I also noticed that, that a lot of them their moods are all over the board. And
True.
it seems like their cognitive skills get affected and
Mhm.
their mood swings are all over. So if you have somebody, a loved one who one minute is feeling fine and the next minute they're frustrated and angry, how do you deal with somebody that is having consistent mood changes?
That is a great question, Stacey. First, step back for just a second and think mostly what any of those mood changes are coming from is fear. They're scared. They don't
Yeah.
understand, or they don't know how to do something they used to know how to do, or you're trying to tell them something and they don't get it.
Mhm.
Most of their anger and aggressions coming from fear. So
Right.
just keep that in the back of your mind at all times. One of the hardest things I think people have to learn is you can't win an argument with dementia.
Yes.
So don't try to convince them that you're right and they're wrong. Complete waste of time. As a matter of fact, if you're dealing or starting to deal with any kind of delusional behavior or anything like that, we have an episode. It's the only episode we have that's over 30 minutes because it's so packed of ways to manage delusions. And that's one of the hardest things you have to deal with dementia is delusions. And I would suggest anybody who's dealing with someone with dementia, if you're getting past that really early stage and starting into the mid stage, listen to that episode because when delusions start, you don't want to be caught not having any idea what to do. It breaks your heart. It's like a slap in the face because you're like, you don't know there. Who are you? I'm Nancy. No, you're not. Well, you have no idea what to do. Well, we talk you through in that episode exactly how to get through a delusion with someone who's living with dementia. And so much better to recognize it when it's happening and know, oh, what did Nancy and Sue say to do? Oh, they said the first thing I need to do is calm down and just get a good calm look on my face and get in right there with them and talk through what's happening. So anyway, I highly suggest you listen to that episode because frankly, that's one of those where it's better to know beforehand what to expect than to find out in the middle of it, you have no idea what to do.
Right. Is there like certain methods that you could do to calm them, or is it sometimes better to step away and maybe just let them be for a little bit and then try to come back and, maybe change the subject or, try things from a different approach?
The very first thing you have to do is be calm and don't fight. Don't fight about it. If they don't know who you are, no, it adds zero value. And believe me, you will not convince them. Doesn't matter that you are
Right.
who you say you are. So accept this is their reality. And then you're going to actually step into their reality with them. You're
Yes.
going to say, instead of I'm Nancy, I'm your wife, you're going to say, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that. What is it, that are you, what's happening right now? My father-in-law used to do this all the time. My
Yeah.
mother-in-law would call me, can you come over? He doesn't
Mhm.
know who I am and he wants to go home. So I would drive over there. I did the exact same thing every time. I'd get over there and I'd say, Pap, what's happening? Well, I need to go home. And I'd say, okay, well, you know, it's getting kind of dark, but of course you're going to go home. Well, I,
Yeah.
I need to go. Well, how about if you go, it's okay because you're supposed to go home tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow? I'd say, yeah, everybody. Well, do my parents know he was 90? Do my parents know that I'm coming home? Yeah, but they think you're coming home tomorrow.
Mm.
Oh, well, okay. So you get in the delusion with them as opposed to fighting with them. And then you do what you suggested, Stacey. You're dead on. Then once you get them a little bit calm, you try to distract. You know what? Let's get some ice cream, or let's turn on some music, or let's go over here and watch TV. As soon as you think they've calmed down just a little bit and you think I might can distract, give it a shot. If it
Yeah.
doesn't work, keep talking through it. And then when you get them calmed down, distract again. At one point, the distraction is going to work. So you
Yes.
just keep going back and forth, but you get in there with them. You don't fight about it. You don't pretend they're wrong. You just, get through the process with them. Be calm, check your body language. Back to that again. Look at the
Yeah.
look on your face and just help them through the process because they're scared to death. That's really what it boils down to.
I agree with you. I think a lot of times it's fear, and I think a lot of times I've seen that it's frustration too, is that it's
Mm-hmm.
they're at a state where they can function at a better level. They think back of what they used to be, and they look
Mm-hmm.
at themselves of what they are now, and,
Mm-hmm.
and that brings a lot of frustration, and that
Mm-hmm.
brings a lot of anger because they remember that, well, when I was younger, I was able to do this. Now I can't even remember this, and I can't do this, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going blank, and a lot of anger and frustration comes out, and it's hard when they're to see them in so much pain. As caregivers, the only thing you can do is support them, love them, and do whatever you can to help them along the way. So, for people, it's very hard, I think, for caregivers because they're powerless. They have no control of the situation. So for maybe parents or loved ones who have someone with dementia, how do you work through that powerlessness, that you can't change the situation. Situation is here, the only thing you can do is take it for what it is and make it the best that you can for the person who is going through it. And so what's your advice for people? Because people get very frustrated that they can't make things better. People always want to be in control. They want to be able to, change things. And sometimes people have to realize that we don't have control. Life has control of us. We can only make decisions to make things better by our actions. So how do you feel about that?
Well, you hit the nail on the head because there are several um, stages of caregiving. But when you get to the point where you accept things the way they are, you become a pragmatic caregiver, your life will change for the better. Like, I can't even begin to tell you. If I could figure out a way to rush people to that point, I
Mhm.
would, because that is the trick to the entire concept of caregiving for someone with dementia. So, two things. First, you talked about the person living with dementia thinking about the way it used to be and being frustrated. Well, that's exactly what caregivers do. So,
Yes.
when you get in that middle of the caregiving, I call it the messy middle, where
Mhm.
they're still fighting for control because they still think they can do it, and they can't do it anymore. So you went from just supporting them and helping them maintain their independence to you have to tell them when to do everything or help them do everything. And they're mad and frustrated because you are. That's the messy middle. The best thing you can do is stop thinking about the way things used to be. That so much of the support groups you see that people are like, I'm so frustrated because he used to be able to tie his own shoes and now I have to tie them. Let it go. Let it go. If you can get in your head, let it go. Quit worrying about the way things used to be or even thinking about the way things used to be. That's not where they are right now. Get in the moment. The problem with dementia is sometimes you take 2 steps back and then 1 step forward. So they can't tie their shoes. They can't tie their shoes. Oh, they tied their shoes. So as soon as you see they can't tie their shoes, it's coming. They're not going to be able to tie their shoes. Even if they can do it 2 days from now, you have to let go of the outcome and be in the moment. And then the other thing I see caregivers do is they like to project out into the future. So we they can't tie how about this? They won't get in the shower. They won't get in the shower. They won't get in the shower. It's a fight to get them in the shower. Well, you can fight them about getting in the shower because people with dementia have depth perception issues. They have sensitive skin. Why are you forcing them in the shower? But we're forcing them in the shower. We're having a big battle about it over and over and over again. Once they don't want to get in the shower, let it go. Use and we have a whole episode on bathing and dressing. There's plenty of things you can sponge bath someone and they smell perfectly fine, I promise you. And instead of fighting about stuff, but then you're in your head, well, if they don't take a shower, they're going to smell terrible. And how am I going to survive and living in the same house with them and so on? Don't project into the future. Don't look at the past. Be in the current moment and deal with the current moment. And the minute you get to that point in your caregiving journey, your level of calm you'll just be in a level of zen that you can't imagine. Doesn't mean that every now and then something's not going to shock you and you're going to be in a tizzy about it, but it won't be the everyday you as a caregiver. It'll be the exception to the rule. So it's a huge transition. You hit the nail on the head. I'm sure that must be good advice you give for other reasons because that's dead on for dementia caregiving.
I think people don't realize too that the changes, like you mentioned, depth perception and sensitive skin. I don't think people realize that there are changes going on, not just mentally, but there's a lot of things because when their mental state and then their body starts changing because their mind is changing, their body is changing, and there are a lot of different things. Maybe you can mention a few things what to expect when someone has dementia or is just in the beginning stages, the things that are going to happen that people might not be aware. So they need to prepare themselves and have a little empathy for the other person because they're now going to go through changes more than just the memory.
Yes. And this is why we put the podcast out and the blogs out because so many people don't recognize these things. And then let's use a pretty strong example, eating and drinking. Someone with dementia is going to forget how to use the fork.
Right.
They're going to forget how to what the process of eating is. They're going to forget to drink. They're going to forget if they just ate something or if they haven't eaten anything all day.
Right.
They're just not going to remember those things. And so what I find is people will say, oh, my mother doesn't eat anymore. We put food down and then she takes a couple of bites and then she's done. Well, you know what? She's not done. She's done remembering what to do. So you need to, I tell people, you've got to take control of it. If you've given her a sandwich and she's had a couple of bites, you have to restart the eating process for them. So you need to hand her the sandwich or even hand it to her and let her take a bite out of it from your hand or spoon their meat and hand it to them. At some point, if you know the end result is they will not be able to feed themselves, you're slowly going to take over the feeding process. Not recognizing that process has started is a big problem because this person now is not getting enough nutrition to stay alive. So recognizing what's coming is huge in terms of how you adjust to the kinds of physical changes that someone's brain is causing them to not be able to do things they couldn't do before, like feed themselves.
Right.
Death perception's a big one. Steps. If they live upstairs, if their bedroom's upstairs,
Hmm.
there is a point they will not be able to do steps. You need to think about their living situation. If you've got a guest room downstairs or someplace they can move, be ready, because they cannot do stairs at some point.
Hmm.
Incontinence. They're going to
Yeah.
be incontinent. It's going to happen.
Right.
And we have 5 episodes on incontinence, starting with what to expect and how to know it's coming, to
Yes.
how to take care of someone who's bedbound, who's incontinent, and
Yeah.
everything in between, because that's an inflection point for a lot of people. Especially if they're taking care of a parent, they're like, I got it up till here, but now that's a boundary I don't want to cross. Well, you know
Right.
what? Listen to some of these episodes, and if it's a boundary you can't cross, then you'll know it before it happens, and you can start looking for other living arrangements for your care receiver.
Right.
Maybe you can deal with urinary incontinence, but you can't deal with bowel incontinence. Hey, that's good to know. Listen to these episodes. You can figure that out, and then be ready so that you're already preparing for another living situation if that's what happens.
I think that's great advice. I think, I think a lot of people too, they just they get frustrated too, as caregivers because they got so much going on in their own lives too. They're trying to
Mhm.
do the right thing. They're trying to take care of the person they love, but then they might have a family, they might have a job, and they might have, young kids and they're running around trying to take care of the young kids and they're still trying to take
Mhm.
care of the person who they love that has dementia. What are some advice that you can give for someone who has a very packed lifestyle and they're still trying to be a caregiver at the same time and it's overwhelming for them? What do they do?
Yeah, it is overwhelming. So let me hit one other thing that's relative to this, and then we'll hit the caregiver themselves. So first, if you're trying to support someone like a parent who's got dementia living independently, there's lots of things you can do. You can get cameras. There's lots of things you can help manage. But let me talk through a couple of things that I call deal breakers. If they
Hmm.
can't take their medication, I mean, I've got a friend whose father still lives independently, but they literally she's got 2 siblings, thank goodness. They call him 3 times a day, and they have a camera that's focused on his pillbox, and they watch him take his meds 3 times a day. Each one of
Wow.
them has a different time of day. But if they can't take their medication, they can't live alone.
Right.
If they can't effectively create a meal or eat a meal, they can't live alone.
Right.
So, and if they can't use the telephone, they can't live alone. They can't dial 911 or dial you if they can't. And that happens with some types of dementia really early, where they can't use the phone anymore. They don't know what to do. They cannot live alone. So first, you can be as supportive as you want to be, but there is a point in time where this person is not going to be able to live alone. And that actually moves into your caregiver comment, because
Mhm.
caregiving for someone with dementia can be just supporting them at first. But there is a point where someone with dementia cannot live alone. They either need to be in a care community or they need someone living with them.
Mhm.
And so you have to decide where you are in that process and where your boundary is and how your life is set up, because at some point they're going to need full-time care. Now, if you're the primary caregiver and you're the one giving full-time care, you do have to find the balance. And the balance is there are only a couple of ways to do it. Either
Mhm.
there is a point where you can't even care for them by yourself. You can't even just have one caregiver. You
Yeah.
have to either have somebody come into the home, or you've got to use adult daycare or something, because you've got to go to the grocery store. You've got to go to your doctor's appointment. You've got to run errands. Somebody has to run the household. And so you can't even be a primary caregiver just with someone who's living with dementia once they can't leave the house anymore and go with you on these errands.
Right.
Um, so you have to find what your boundaries are and how your life is gonna change. I'll give an example. I cared for my husband here at home,
Mhm.
and I worked full time during his early dementia.
Mhm.
And I slowly started working from home. This was before COVID. Slowly
Mhm.
started working from home. I was working from home 4 days a week because someone came into our home to clean on Fridays, and she would be there for at least 4 hours so I could run into the office for 4 hours and get some work done. I
Right.
eventually worked from home completely. Then I had to go part-time, and then
Mhm.
I had to retire.
Right.
all of that, even though I also, by the time halfway through when I was working part-time, I actually got a part-time caregiver as well at home.
Right.
But that's what the sacrifice was. So you have to know how it fits into your life and where your sacrifice is and what your support is around you in terms of
Mhm.
how caring for someone with dementia is going to progress and what
Yeah.
that's going to mean to your progression as their caregiver.
Right. Oh, definitely, definitely. Now, it comes a point sometimes when they need to be in a facility where it's just too much for one person to take care of, or they need medical attention, they need a nurse, they need someone watching over them and helping them. But those facilities can be extremely expensive. Now, do you know of any, because it varies by state, but are there resources that people can go to? Because, the sad thing is that people that have dementia, and they have facilities to take care of them, the prices are so outrageous that it makes it virtually impossible for a lot of families to afford it. And a lot of people in their elder age don't have a lot of money. So even trying to use the money that they have is not going to go very far. So it really, it really is a very tight situation, a hard situation, because it could wipe out, a couple's, entire bank account, if, because some of these places can run $10,000 a month, $7,000 a month, and before you know it, that adds up and you don't know, so are there resources that people can go to and try to get, external help from other organizations and other places that this maybe even the states might offer?
So let me back into that question. So first, we just did an episode maybe about a month ago on home versus community.
Mhm.
I did keep my husband at home the entire time and my father-in-law at home the entire time. But to your point, that's not free either, because at some point you have to have caregivers in your home. Now, what kind of caregivers you have, there are people who are able to split it. It's expensive no matter what you're doing. Let's just say that, okay? No matter how you're doing it.
Mhm.
But in that podcast, the very first tip we have is get an elder care attorney
Mm,
or a financial advisor who's focused on elder care.
right.
They're dependent because it is state dependent in terms of the kind of support you can get. Some states are much easier than others in terms of
Yeah.
how you can get support. And elder care attorneys, or I would just suggest that number one, but at worst, a financial analyst who's focuses on elder care. These are people who know how to help you through the process of figuring out where your assets are, what you need to do to potentially be eligible for government programs. The VA is a good example. For my father-in-law, we had 4 hours, 4 days a week. We got 16 hours a week from the VA. We split it 4 hours, 4 days a week to give some level of support to him
Mhm.
because he was a veteran. So that was a huge help early on. There
Yeah.
was a time towards the end that I thought we cannot keep him at home anymore. And I truly believe he passed away from old age as that was happening. But we were right at the end because he had other medical conditions. And there are people where it's not just dementia. Dementia causes complications with other medical conditions. So his other medical conditions were worse because we couldn't manage them because he had dementia, because he couldn't help us manage them. So anyway,
Yes.
it is complicated. But I suggest an elder care attorney or a financial advisor focused on elder care to help you walk through what all the options are, because there is help, but it's a really difficult thing to navigate, and everyone's personal situation is different. And a little bit of why we created this podcast to begin with, Stacey, is because so many people can't afford a care community.
Yeah.
And so they are stuck supporting their person living with dementia at home because they can't afford a care community because they're very expensive, to your point. And
Mhm.
so this is their only option. So how do we help them get all the way through the process to the end when someone is bedbound? And we
Yeah.
try to cover all that. Matter of fact, we just did an episode on when to call in hospice. Most people
Mhm.
think hospice is just when you're actively dying, the last, 10 days. And yet
Right.
hospice is a great resource towards the late stages of dementia to come in and actually assist in terms of their care. One
Right.
of my friends has hospice come in every morning and showers and gets his wife ready so that he can then take her to adult daycare where she
Mhm.
spends most of the rest of the day so he can do his job during the day. So
Right.
anyway, lots of resources, but leverage elder care attorneys if you can.
I love that. I don't think a lot of people know about elder care attorneys, I didn't know about elder care attorneys, and I did a lot of research. And so I think that's something that's a really good thing to understand and to know. Now, as we're talking, is there any other topics or anything that you really like to state, for people that have someone, a loved one with dementia that you feel is important for them to know?
I do. And I really never finished answering one of your questions that was very important, which is when your loved one goes to the neurologist or to the primary care physician and they get a diagnosis of dementia, you just got a diagnosis of caregiver. You
Hmm.
have to think of it as a team sport. You are not the caregiver for the person with dementia. You are the caregiver for your team, and your team is you and them. And so
Right.
you have to take just as seriously caring for yourself as you do caring for them, because you will be a terrible, mean, unhappy caregiver. And if you want them to be treated well, if you want them to have good care, you have to take care of yourself or you won't be a good caregiver and
Right.
you'll fall apart. And we had an example of that just this week on the news where the caregiver passed away and then the person was living by themselves for best estimates for a week and they
Wow.
passed away. And so consequently, a lot of caregivers' health is at risk as well because caregiving is an extremely stressful situation. So try to get into that pragmatic caregiver world where you are able to live in the moment. That's number one. But number two, take your care as seriously as you take the responsibility for your care receiver's care because you are caring for both of you. And the whole
Yeah.
situation will fall apart if you aren't both cared for.
Right. Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that's very good advice. I also noticed that a lot of times too is that when they're in the beginning stages, it's so important to try to support them and encourage them the best you can and to be positive with them because a lot of times if people fall into depression because they have just gotten a diagnosis of dementia, that depression alone could actually be the landslide that actually could shorten your lifespan. And,
Good point.
I've seen that. I've seen that with people that have gotten diagnoses and because of that, they were doing fine and to the point where they lost that positivity to want to live. They just got to the point where they got so depressed that they felt life just wasn't worth it. And that mentality, the mind is so powerful. People don't realize how powerful the mind is. But once you lose that determination to live, it's like a landslide and your body, your mind and your body both give up at the same time. And I've seen people die within weeks once their mentality has changed. And it's amazing, but the mind is so powerful. One, you have to stay positive as best as you can. And people, especially the caregivers, have to keep pumping that positive energy into them because I feel like once they lose that positive energy, then it's a lose-lose situation.
I agree. And frankly, they're still in there. They're still in there. And if you're smiling at them, and my husband to the last day, if you're smiling at him, he's smiling right back at you. And,
Yeah.
just trying to let you know he's in there. So, they're in there, even if they can't communicate with you, even if they can't call you by name, they're in there and they're doing the best they can to live. So smile and make it a happy time while they're trying to do the best they can to live. There's no reason why it has to be an unhappy, fearful situation. Give it your most positive, like you said, give it your most positive language and your most positive body language, and that will help. It'll help both of you. When you're smiling, you feel better.
Yeah, you do. Do you feel that it's good for maybe the caregiver also to get go maybe if it's really difficult for them to maybe go for some therapy because it's putting so much pressure on them and they're feeling depressed seeing the person that they love change so traumatically
Mhm.
and they're remembering what that person used to be like so that emotionally they're becoming distraught about it and they're going through some mental health issues themselves just by being in the situation. So do you recommend maybe maybe therapy or certain services that they could reach out to?
The biggest challenge when you're a dementia family caregiver is feeling like you have the time to take care of yourself. And if one of the things that would help you take care of yourself is to see a counselor or a therapist, or even join an online support group. There's one on Facebook called Dementia, I don't know, Dementia Support Group or something like that. I get on it all the time.
Right, right.
And, you know, people just vent or they ask questions, but, you know, I put my mother-in-law on that and she said, oh, everybody else is having the same problems I am. I'm like, I know, it's what I'm trying to tell you. You're not the only person in the world this is happening to. Somehow that makes them feel better as well. Most churches or places have local support groups. If you can get someone to come take your place, I always say this, if you want to give a gift to a caregiver, give them the gift of time. Come sit with their care receiver for an hour or two while they go do something else. That's the best gift you can give a caregiver. So that, and one of those things is to go get support from other people, or just go have lunch with your friends. Frankly, some people want to go have lunch with their friends and talk about anything but dementia. And that's
Yes,
good too. Go do it, you know?
100%. Now, if you had to take today's conversation and you wanted to emphasize on some important factors, what would be some things you'd like to emphasize on?
Caregiving is a team sport. So you're caregiving for both of you. Do not forget that. Communication. We've talked about it a lot today, but positive communication helps your care receiver, but it helps you too. So it's worth it for both of you. You can't win a battle with dementia. So be ready. Don't fight about it. When delusions start, be ready. Go listen to that episode, know what the tips are for delusions. And I would say probably more than anything is, you know, do take care of you. You know, it's hard to make that a priority, but you have to give yourself permission to do it, and give yourself permission to make yourself a priority. And I know we talked about caregiving as a team sport, but permission to make yourself a priority, it doesn't feel right, but it's the right thing to do.
I like that because a lot of people, they feel shameful, they feel embarrassed, or they feel it's not the right thing to do if they don't focus on the person that has dementia and they focus on themselves, they feel guilty and shameful about it. But you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself
So
first.
true. That's so true. Yeah.
Now, can you tell us about some of the services that your organization provides?
So we're a nonprofit, and just come out to our website or look for our podcast. It's called The Caregiver's Journey. That's the name of the podcast as well. Our main two resources on the website are the podcast and the blog, but my partner Sue has also written a book on caregiving. It's very good. I really enjoy it. We have an online course on caregiving as well. And then we have guides and worksheets that go with the podcast that we have. So you can go on the website and get access to those as well.
Oh, wonderful. And where can we find the book?
You can find the book on Amazon, or you can find it off our website. If you go to the Caregiver's Journey, go to the Learn page, and on there are the guides, workbooks, the online learning course, as well as Sue's book.
Wonderful. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Nancy, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate what you're doing. It's so important that people, you know, help others, and we have organizations to support each other, because that's the only way you're going to get through it, is by networking, connecting with others, getting support from others, because there are so many times, you know, you just need to have somebody to know that you're not alone. And sometimes you just, you know, you don't know what to do. You don't know what the next step is. You don't know where to begin. And just having someone just gently guide you and support you and give you that encouragement and just motivation that you need, you know, can help you get through it, and it can really help you on your journey with your loved one, you know, or friend who has dementia that you're taking care of. And you know, it's a very important, you know, job, and it's also a very stressful job. And I don't think people realize how much goes into being a caregiver. And we really have to commend people who are caregivers, because they put in a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of love, and it's a big factor in their life, and they have to balance a lot of things in order to do it. So I think people really have to, sometimes really understand and really have compassion for the caregivers, because sometimes they look at the person who has the disease or the disorder, and they forget about what the caregiver is going through. And we really have to, turn our heads and really give support and love to the caregiver for them reaching out and doing this job, which is a huge job and responsibility.
So true. So true. We want dementia family caregivers to feel confident. That confidence will make them more patient and will give them peace of mind. And that's really the goal of the practical tips that we bring to the table.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I thank you so much for what you're doing. I thank you and I commend you for being a caregiver yourself and everything that you went through in life. It's hard, and it takes a toll on you, and it stays with you for the rest of your life, because it's an experience that you'll never forget. It's an emotional experience too that will always be in your heart. And but like as you said earlier, it's something good that we do, and we know that at the end, we know that we did the right thing, and no matter how hard the journey was, we did the right thing, and we could put our heads up high and know that we did something that was really good, and they recognize it. They recognize what we did, and they love us for it, and we love them. And and deep down inside, no matter what we went through to do it, we know that it was the right thing, and it was out of love. And that's the only thing you can do, is just pour your heart out, give your love and your support. And deep down inside, we know that they're looking at us, and they're looking at us with love and affection and appreciation. Even if they can't verbally say it to us, they feel it inside.
That's right. Thank you, Stacey, for having me on and for helping us get the word out.
Oh, you're very welcome. And you have a great day.
Thank you.